All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Lesperance. I go by the name of my man Richard. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. Today, I have the pleasure to have Andy Semotiuk with me. So, welcome, Andy, to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Great. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Andy Semotiuk?
Wow, that's a big question. I'm a U.S. and Canadian immigration attorney, lawyer. I'm a member of the U.S. and Canadian bars. I've practiced 10 years in Los Angeles, 5 years in New York, and currently I'm with Pace Law Firm in Toronto. But that's only one aspect of my life. I have several other aspects. So, for example, I'm an author. I've written 4 books, published 5 books actually, and my most recent book is it's called Solomia, Star of Opera's Golden Age, and it's a book about a once famous opera star who was the world's greatest opera star in the first decade of the 20th century. But it's not a book about opera or just about this person. It's about human achievement and what a person can do to lift themselves from obscurity to world fame, to the very top of their calling, whatever it might be, law, opera, medicine, whatever it is. And that's another aspect of my writing. I write about the immigrant experience on the one hand, about getting to the top, self-improvement, becoming a better person, topics such as that, and a bit about humor. So that's the second part of my life. And a third part of my life is where I come from. My ancestors, including my mother and father, came from Ukraine. And as you probably know right now, Ukraine is in a life and death war with Russia. That invaded Ukraine about just over 2.5 years ago. And the war is all about freedom, independence, and sovereignty of a nation, but more importantly, about our freedom and our sovereignty as a people, since the threat currently is in Ukraine, but at any time could be spreading to other parts of Europe and also even to Canada across the northern border and so on. So those are aspects of who I am. But as you probably know, that's one of the deepest questions you can ask an individual is, who are you? And it takes a lot of thought to come up with a good answer.
So, why law? Why immigration law?
Well, first of all, law. It runs in the family. My forefathers, my grandfather was a lawyer. My uncle was a lawyer. But in my case, I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, and I was raised. My father died when I was 9 years old. My mother took care of me and raised me, and often I had to help her with sort of business, legal matters, papers coming in, and dealing with banking and stuff like that. And it just became part of my life to be looking at these things that are happening in our world and interpreting them to my mother and dealing with them. That's my early childhood. Like anybody else, initially I wanted to be a bus driver, then a fireman, etc. And I eventually ended up thinking, hey, maybe this legal area would be something that I might be good at. And then as I grew older, I developed this thought. The thought was, these world conflicts, like I mentioned, Ukraine or Gaza or whatever, what's going on in Africa, these kind of events, these activities, these things that are going on, they can be solved if someone knows the law and just writes it out and explains it to everybody, the warring parties. They'll come to understand, oh, we misunderstood what this is all about. It's about this was my belief that if I studied the law, I could become a world leader, helping people sort out their problems through the law. but little did I understand that human conduct is governed by law, but also by many other things: emotions, self-interest, national interest. And by the time I came out of law school, I realized, wait a minute, this is too complicated. It's larger than that. And because my family were immigrants, I sort of related to that. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I could make some headway in the area of immigration law. And over time, it kind of fit in with my lifestyle as I traveled a lot between Canada and the United States. And it was mobile. I could travel back and forth with it.
So let's talk about the books that you have. Let's talk about Solomea. So I know it's dear to your heart. So because I think it's about your aunt. So
Yes, it is.
what did she had to overcome in order to achieve success?
Well, she was born in Ukraine, in a part of Ukraine that was, at the time of her birth, under Austro-Hungarian rule. And over the course of her life, she realized that she loved music. She loved to sing. And her father, it's a long story, but the basic gist of it is her father said, okay, well, we'll back you. They had a family of 8 kids, but the father said, okay, I'll back you and see if we can get somewhere with you going to, opera school. And so she went to school first in Lviv in Western Ukraine, what is today Western Ukraine, and then to Milan. And in time, she learned opera. But someone from Eastern Europe at that time was not exactly welcome in Italy as an opera singer. There were 2 things running against her. One is she was Eastern European, and Italians were not keen on advancing Eastern Europeans. And the other was that she was a woman, and it was a man's world. So she had to battle and struggle to get up and make a name for herself in the opera world. And there was some luck involved, but there was also hard work, very hard work, dedicating herself to her calling, her craft. In the meantime, she lost her father. There was world wars involved and so on. But she rose to the top of her calling in the 1900s, the early 1900s, and met some of the top people in the opera world, people like Puccini, like Toscanini, like Caruso. And she became a mentor to Caruso, who was the world's greatest tenor at one time, and known very well until Pavarotti showed up in our lifetime later on, becoming a world tenor, among others. But she performed with those people, and she traveled all over the world. Something that might be of interest is she performed all over Europe, all over North Africa, all over South America and North America. In fact, she came to the United States. She was in New York. In 1928, she came to New York. And that was a time when jazz was big in New York City. Like, you had Duke Ellington and all these guys and these clubs performing jazz. And she loved all kinds of music. She was attracted to all kinds, including, I'm sure, jazz music. It was the same year that the Chrysler Building was built in New York, if you know the Chrysler Building. But anyway, so she performed in New York, in Philadelphia, Chicago, etc., and even in Montreal, where you are today, and also in Winnipeg. Imagine going out in 1928 to Winnipeg. That's like from Toronto. It would have been probably a 3-day train ride out there to perform which she did in 1928, and then returned back to Europe. She lived through 2 wars. She died in the former Soviet Union, dispossessed of all her wealth, behind the Iron Curtain and not allowed to leave. So that's a short story about her life. But I should add one other thing. She was responsible for the success of the opera Madame Butterfly. And that's a story unto itself. But this is the 120th anniversary of the success of the opera Madame Butterfly this year, for those who are interested in opera. And Puccini collapsed with that opera at La Scala, the top opera theater in the world in Milan. And he had to turn to someone to help him resurrect the opera. And he was directed to her by Arturo Toscanini, a conductor in Milan, who said, "There's only one woman that can help you save this opera. It's Solomia. Solomia Krushelnitska was her last name." And he went to Solomia. She was already at the top of her fame at that time. And it would be like asking Julia Roberts today to star in a film that just collapsed with Sandra Bullock as the lead, star of the movie, and to restage the movie and try and make it a success. But they did. And to turn the corner, they worked for months in Brescia, in Italy, about 60 miles east of Milan. And they performed in the Teatro Grande, where they made it a success.
The other book you have is a Promise Kept by I think your mother is in that book. So what are the trials and tribulation that she encountered?
Well, my mother was deaf. She came down with scarlet fever when she was 2, and that took away half of her hearing. And then when she was 12, she had scarlet fever, meningitis at 2 and scarlet fever at 12. And that took away most of the rest of her hearing. So basically, she was deaf. And she lived with the star, Solomia. Both names were the same. That was her namesake. But there was a great irony in their lives. Solomia, my mother, who was deaf and living with the great opera star at one time at least, in the opera star's building in Lviv in Western Ukraine, could not hear the beauty of the voice that was applauded worldwide. That is to say, her aunt's voice in the theaters of the world. The great irony between the two that probably drew them together. But over time, my mother, she lived in the Stars building from, I think, about 1920, something around 1920, through to 1939, when World War II broke out. And my mother ended up living with the star, came back at that time to Ukraine in 1939. And the two of them lived together in the building in the darkest moments of World War II. And when World War II was ending and the Red Army was invading from the east, coming into Lviv and then moving on to Germany, my mother's family, the grandmother, grandfather, and the others in the family, had to make a decision to run, to escape. And so it was either stay and witness the Red Army coming in and face what's going to happen in the Soviet Union, or run and flee to the West. And they decided to flee. But Solomia, the opera star, was left behind because she was then older, in her 60s, lame because she had broken her leg, and looking after her sister, Anusha, who was emotionally troubled. So my family, my mother and her family escaped to Western Europe, and then was sponsored to Canada by a farmer from Park Court, Alberta. Park Court is about 60 miles west of Edmonton, somewhere in a deserted area of the prairies. In fact, it's not the end of the world, but you can almost see the end of the world from Park Court. And so my mother came to join this farmer, to live a life with a farmer. And there was great hardship there. She being deaf, they being in a one sort of cabin existence out on the farms. He had children living from a previous marriage, and she had to look after these kids. And what happened was they made it for 1 year together. And then she decided she can't live on the farm like this. She, it's just too hard for her. And she one day picked up and left. Deaf, penniless, unable to speak English, and pregnant. She left my father and got on a bus and went out to Edmonton and made her way from that day on, with me ultimately giving birth to me and making a life in Edmonton. Later coming to live with William Semotiuk, who was my father, my adopted father. And that's where I got my name, Semotiuk. So, and she raised me. William Basil died when I was 9 years old. And she raised me, washing floors to put me through law school. I remember coming home, studying at night, seeing her washing floors in a apartment house that she ran to have enough money to live and put me through school. So I have great respect for her legacy. That's why I wrote the book.
You have another book, Young Professional. Talk to us about that book.
Practicing law, I helped a lot of young people going into the professions, in particular, teachers, architects, lawyers, dentists, doctors, etc. I met all kinds, but a lot of them were going into the professions. And I noticed that there were 3 problems that most of them were facing. One or more of 3 problems, virtually everybody, but especially them, were facing. The problems were money, time, and balance. So I wrote a book called The Young Professional, addressing those concerns. How to deal with money problems, how to deal with time problems, how to deal with balance problems. And briefly, with regard to money, I argue that the key to money is to be working in your area of unique ability. That place where you can outperform everyone because it's your unique ability. Time is a question of implementing a strategy. I argue for the 80-20 rule, that 20% of what you do brings 80% of the results that you want in your life. So you have to identify what are the 20% priorities in your life. And balance, is a question of looking at your values and asking yourself honestly, are you paying attention to your values? Are you a circle or are you a flat tire? Depending on whether you're paying attention to all your values or not.
Do you think most people maximize their potential?
Most people are capable of a lot more than they achieve, including myself. But it's wrong to aim for perfection, because perfection, we're human beings, we're not perfect. But it's right to aim for excellence in your life. And if you can strive and achieve excellence, that's a life well lived. Excellence according to your values.
You do speaking engagements. What do you talk on those speaking gigs?
When I speak, it can be about immigration. I mentioned I'm with Pace Law Firm, and I'm practicing immigration law. Or I can talk about these themes, like motivation is a theme that I like to talk about. How do you motivate someone? What makes a person want to get up in the morning and go to work and do something? And I believe part of motivation is working in your unique ability. And to work in your unique ability, you have to find your unique ability. So there's a self-diagnosis required. You have to work on yourself. There's a saying, if you'll work hard on yourself, life will go easy for you. But if you don't work hard on yourself, life can be hard on you. So I talk on that theme. And I talk about Salomia and the story of the resurrection of the opera Madame Butterfly. It's a good story. If we had the time, I would tell you the story. It's a great story. You'd love it.
Where can people find you on social media and the internet?
Well, Pace Law Firm is where you could find me. My books are on, I have a personal website called myworkvisa.com, and you can find my books there if you want to look for them. They're all on Amazon or Barnes and Noble and so on if you want to look for them. And I think that's pretty much it if they're looking for me.